Observations with Robert, Meyer, Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your evangelist of the imagination, and of course, your existential Mr. Rogers. That's right, me, Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 687. My God. It comes as no surprise to anyone who listens to this channel that I love stories. I think we all do. I think storytelling and being a connoisseur of storytelling and of experiencing stories, telling stories ourselves, and also listening to other people's stories or watching other people's stories or experiencing them however you do. Because why? Because stories are not only something that are interesting from an external perspective, because narratives about how the world works or what happens are inherently sort of interesting, but also internally. At the same time, we're asking ourselves whenever we hear a story, what would it be like if I was the protagonist in this tale? And that's not a narcissistic thing. We ask ourselves this because at every moment in a story, every time the plot turns, we wonder ourselves, at least with the great stories, what would we do if we were in the protagonist's position? Or what would we do if we were our friend who was conveying to us the story that happened to them the night before? How would we react? How would we respond? And that's one of the things that makes storytelling inherently interesting. One, there is the sort of that narrative that we follow externally, but there's also the internalization of what would we do if we were the protagonist in that story. Every decision that's made, we weigh it, and it becomes fascinating for us. And I think in my time on this planet Earth, as I am a mere hours away from my birthday, I think that one of the things that I've enjoyed most in my life that has never sort of let me down is the experience of stories, either having them being told to me or wanting to craft them myself. But storytelling is the greatest way we convey truths of human existence to one another. That's what stories are all about. They're a delivery system for human truth. The truth of our human existence is brought to you by the stories that you love. And that's why I think we tell each other stories. It's a way for us to sort of codify the experience of life. And the better the story, the more authentic it feels. The best stories are the most authentic stories, the stories that ring true, that have so much truth in them. And that's why I love verisimilitude, because in storytelling, the truth of that story, the reality of the story is very important. If you can't believe the things within the story, it has no resonance. You don't buy it. And when I say that, look, when you tell a science fiction story, you can have verisimilitude in that science fiction story. Alien, I don't know if this is going to happen, but the Critical Drinker reached out to me today and said, hey, we should do a stream. We haven't done a stream since December when we talked about Star Trek the Motion Picture. He asked me, I'd love to do a stream with you. What would you like to talk about? And one of the movies I threw at him, I said, I'd love to talk about Alien. Hopefully this will happen next week. But one of the things about Alien is, look, I've never been on the commercial towing vehicle Nostromo. I've never been in a space refinery. Hell, I've never really been a blue-collar truck driver. I've never been an oil worker. I've never been any of those things. But what the movie Alien does, and we'll talk about this a little later, I won't get too deep into the weeds on Alien, but Alien makes you believe in these scenarios because it has enough reality in it that it makes you buy into the story it's telling. You're like, okay, well, if there was a commercial towing vehicle in space, and if it was hauling a giant space refinery, this is kind of what it would be like. And the characters that Alien populates itself with are people we recognize, people we know, family members, friends. We've heard people, whether you've heard people like this, you'd overheard them talking, say at your Denny's at 2 a.m. The great thing about Alien within the confines of a science fiction context, it provides us with people that we recognize and empathize with, people that we like. And once you've done that, you can go anywhere you want with the story. And I think that that's what's pretty interesting. And even though Alien is a science fiction story about facing off against a xenomorph, you still believe what's going on because that struggle could be any struggle. It just happens to be personified in a H.R. Giger design exoskeleton of horror. And it's great stuff. And you believe it. So I found this article from the Harvard Business Review, of all places. And it's written by Carolyn O'Hara. And it's from 2014. And I just wanted to quickly read it. And it's the Harvard Business Review, Managing Yourself. How to Tell a Great Story. And I'm going to read her article. It says, we tell stories to our coworkers and peers all the time. To persuade someone to support our project. To explain to an employee how he might improve, or to inspire a team that is facing challenges. Remember, this is from the Harvard Business Review. It's an essential skill, but what makes a compelling story in a business context? And how can you improve your ability to tell stories that persuade? In our information-saturated age, business leaders, quote, won't be heard unless they're telling stories, unquote, says Nick Morgan, author of Power Cues and president and founder of Public Words, a communications consulting firm. Quote, facts and figures are all the rational things that we think are important in the business world. Actually don't stick in our minds at all, he says. But stories create sticky memories by attaching emotions to things that happen. That means leaders who can create and share good stories have a powerful advantage over others. And fortunately, everyone has the ability to become a better storyteller. We are programmed through our evolutionary biology to be both consumers and creators of stories, says Jonas Sachs, CEO of Free Range Studios and author of Winning the Story Wars. It certainly can be taught and learned. Here's how to use storytelling for your benefit. Start with a message. Every storytelling exercise should begin by asking, who is my audience and what is the message I want to share with them? Each decision about your story should flow from those questions. Sachs says that leaders should ask, what is the core moral that I'm trying to implant in my team? And how can I boil that down to a compelling single statement? For instance, if your team is behaving as if failure is not an option, you might decide to impart the message that failure is actually the grandfather of success. Or if you're trying to convince senior leaders to take a risk by supporting your project, you could convey that most companies are built on taking smart chances. First, settle on your ultimate message, then you can figure out the best way to illustrate it. Mine your own experiences. The best storytellers look to their own memories and life experiences for ways to illustrate their message. What events in your life make you believe in the idea that you are trying to share? Quote, think of a moment in which your own failures led to success in your career or a lesson that a parent or mentor imparted, says Sachs. Any of these things can be interesting emotional entry points to a story. There may be a tendency not to want to share personal details at work, but anecdotes that illustrate struggle, failure, and barriers overcome are what make leaders appear authentic and accessible. Quote, the key is to show your vulnerability, says Morgan. Don't make yourself the hero. That said, don't make yourself the star of your own story, like a Mary Sue. A story is about your chauffeured car, and having millions in stock options is not going to move your employees, says Morgan. You can be a central figure, but the ultimate focus should be on people you know, lessons you've learned, or events you've witnessed. And whenever possible, you should endeavor to make the audience or employees the hero, says Morgan. It increases their engagement and willingness to buy into your message. One of the main reasons we listen to stories is to create deeper belief in ourselves, says Sachs. But when the storyteller talks about how great they are, the audience shuts down. The more you celebrate your own decisions, the less likely your audience will connect with you and your message. Highlight a struggle. A story without a challenge simply isn't very interesting. Good storytellers understand that a story needs conflict. Says Morgan, is there a competitor that needs to be bested? A market challenge that needs to be overcome? A change-resistant industry that needs to be transformed? Don't be afraid to suggest the road ahead will be difficult. We actually like to be told that it's going to be hard, says Morgan. Smart leaders tell employees this is going to be tough. But if we all pull together and hang in there, we'll achieve something amazing in the end. A well-crafted story embedded with that kind of rallying cry means you don't have to demand change or effort, says Sachs. People will become your partners in change because they want to be a part of the journey. Keep it simple. Not every story you tell has to be a surprising, edge-of-your-seat epic. Some of the most successful and memorable stories are relatively simple and straightforward. Don't let needless details detract from your core message. Work from the principle that less is more. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is putting in too much detail of the wrong kind, says Morgan. Don't tell your audience what day of the week it was, for instance, or what shoes you were wearing if it doesn't advance the story in an artful way. But transporting your audiences with a few interesting, well-placed details, how you felt, the expression on a face, the humble beginnings of a now great company, can help immerse your listeners and drive home your message. Practice makes perfect. Storytelling is a real art form that requires repeated effort to get right, says Morgan. Practice with friends, loved ones, and trusted colleagues to hone your message into the most effective and efficient story. And remember that the rewards can be immense. Stories are the original viral tool, says Sachs. Once you tell a very compelling story, the first thing someone does is think, who can I tell this story to? So for the extra 3 minutes you spend encoding a leadership communication in the story, you're going to see returns that last for months and maybe even years. Principles to remember. Do consider your audience. Choose a framework and details that will best resonate with your listeners. Identify the moral or message you want to impart. Find inspiration in your life experiences. Don't assume you don't have storytelling chops. We all have it in us to tell memorable stories. Give yourself the starring role. Don't do that. And don't overwhelm your story with unnecessary details. Case study number 1. Embed conflict to motivate and inspire. Josh Linkner was worried his employees were becoming complacent. Then the CEO of ePrize, a Detroit-based interactive promotions company, Linkner had seen his company become the dominant leader in online promotions industry overnight. In the mid-2000s, quote, we had double and triple growth every year, he says. I became worried that we would start clinging to our previous success instead of forging new success and that our creativity would decline. Greatness is often achieved in the face of adversity, he says, but we didn't have a competitor to gun against. So he made up a fake nemesis. At an all-company meeting, he stood up and announced that there was a brash new competitor named Slither. I told everyone they were bigger than us, faster than us, and more profitable, he says. Their investors had deeper pockets, their footprint was better, and they were innovating at a pace I'd never seen. The story was greeted with chuckles around the room. It was obvious the company was a ruse, but the idea soon became embedded within ePrize's culture. Executives kept reinforcing the Slither story with fake press releases about their competitors' impressive quarterly earnings or infusions of capital, and soon the urge to best the imaginary rival began to drive improved performance. It inspired creativity, Linkner says. In brainstorming sessions, we use Slither as the foil. Instead of saying, okay, guys, we have to reduce our production time. How are we going to do that? I would say the folks over at Slither just shaved 2 days out of their cycle time. How do you think they did it? The whiteboards filled with ideas. Case study 2. Anchor the story in your personal experiences. Vince Molinaro, managing director of the leadership practice at Knightsbridge Human Capital Solutions, Canada's biggest HR advisory, tells clients he knows exactly when his career direction snapped into focus. It was at his first job out of college, with an organization that helped needy individuals get back on their feet. Vince loved the mission but found the atmosphere uninspiring. Everyone just went through the motions, he says. I remember thinking, is this it? Is this what working in the real world is like? A senior manager named Zinta sensed that Vince wanted to have a bigger impact and asked him to join several like-minded colleagues on a committee to make their workplace a more positive environment. They began to make subtle changes, and coworkers' attitudes started to improve. I saw firsthand how a single manager can change the culture of the place, he says. Then Zinta was diagnosed with aggressive lung cancer. In her absence, the office culture began to revert back. On a visit to see Zinta in the hospital, Vince told her about the disappointing turn of events. She surprised him with a confession. Since she had never smoked and had no history of cancer in her family, she was convinced that her disease was a direct function of putting up with a toxic work environment for so long. Shortly after, Zinta sent Vince a letter telling him he would be faced with an important choice throughout his life. He could allow the negative attitudes of others to influence his behavior or pursue professional goals because of the sense of personal accomplishment they offered. In her time of need, she reached out to me, he says. She was a mentor to me even though she didn't need to be. 2 weeks later, Zinta passed away. But the letter changed Vince's life, inspiring him to leave his job and start his own consulting business devoted to helping people be better leaders. I've seen the kind of climate and culture that a great leader can create, he says. For the last 25 years, I've tried to emulate that. He still has Zinta's letter. When Vince first began sharing this story with his leadership clients, he was taken aback by their reaction. There was a connection they had to me that was really surprising, he says. It's like they got me in ways I wasn't able to directly communicate. It also gets them thinking about their own story and the leaders that have influenced them. In my case, it was a great leader. Sometimes it's the really bad ones you learn from. Whatever the case, he says, the power comes from sharing your story with the people you lead so they better understand what motivates you. And now that comes from the Harvard Business Review. And I forgot to change my camera angle. That's what happens when you're doing live shows. But what's interesting to me about that particular story is even in a business context, being a great storyteller is helpful. So the question is, we as imagination connoisseurs, what is it to be an imagination connoisseur? Well, first and foremost, it is to be a lover of storytelling. Whether it's in video games, comics, whether it's in your favorite album, whether it's a 45, maybe it's a single, or it's a whole concept album like Pink Floyd The Wall, which is in itself a story. We love stories. And I think we all know as imagination connoisseurs, we are living in an age which is strange in when the stories that we have loved, which i.e. the franchises we have loved, that garnered our love through great storytelling, have let us down because the stories that they're telling are no longer great stories for whatever reason. And unfortunately, storytelling used to be its own end. You'd tell a story, you'd tell a great story to people because you would move them and hopefully affect them and get some kind of an emotional response. I mean, I go back to Star Wars. Like, of course, did George Lucas make Star Wars because he wanted to become rich? Well, I think in the back of their minds, everybody wants to become rich because what does wealth bring you? It brings you the ability to not worry about anything. You don't have to worry about your bills or where you're going to hang your hat or your car insurance payments or anything. Being rich frees you from worrying about those concerns. So that's a great thing. But George Lucas, again, did not make Star Wars in order so he could get rich. That wasn't the impulse. He wanted to make a movie, and by the way, at the time, no one had made anything like it, so he had no assurances. He didn't know if he was going to get rich. He was turned down by, I mean, hell, they didn't think American Graffiti was going to work when they were at Universal going to test screenings. They had no idea how much of a hit it was going to become. George Lucas, again, didn't want to make these movies because he wanted to necessarily get rich. All filmmakers dream that they're going to get rich off something, sure. But really, storytellers are, first and foremost, storytellers. That's what they want to do. Telling a great story when you're working on a film, if you're writing and directing a film, telling a great story is its own reward because you have to go through so many processes to make movies, whether it's, well, writing the idea, coming up with a great script, and looking for the money and selling it, and then actually producing it, finishing it, taking it all the way through post. You better be damn enamored of your story in order to make a movie or a TV series. And then hopefully what you've come up with at the end of that big, long process, other people will respond to, and then you become successful. But I don't think anybody that created our great franchises did so because they thought they were going to get rich. There's easier ways of getting rich. Storytelling is not necessarily one of them. Sure, in Hollywood you can have great success. But the question is, how do you do that? And making movies can sometimes take years. Well, what do you do in the interim? It's not like someone's going to be dropping tons of money at your doorstep. And it's interesting to watch our franchises that have been actually controlled by larger and larger corporations. It's strange to me that we live in a world where corporations are now in charge of our biggest, boldest storytelling delivery systems, which are, of course, movies or video games, but mostly movies. Now, video games still have at least the production houses, the companies that make something, like Valve making Dota, for instance. It's Valve's. So maybe it's not necessarily one person, but it's definitely a company which is espousing their philosophy of life. That's what you get when you buy whether it's Rockstar or Naughty Dog or whatever, Activision, whatever your video game company of choice is. Their company ideals are espoused through the games that they're making. And video games, as we know, have some incredible stories to tell when they're the best they can be, like whether it's Last of Us or even Uncharted or, hell, Grand Theft Auto. I like the story mode of Grand Theft Auto 5. I finished that shit. But it really, it's an important thing. But when, say, a company like Disney acquires Star Wars, the reason to tell stories is about money. We must make the most money possible. That's why we bought this franchise. So suddenly, the idea of making money, you'd think that they would go hand in hand. That great storytelling and making money would go hand in hand. But they don't. Because great storytelling is not part of a corporate spreadsheet. They just assume, like Disney, the story we covered about Bob Chapek's reign at Disney and how Disney corporate culture is changing, and that Bob Iger's desire to put the creators at the forefront of business is now being pushed aside so they can add more middle management to the process. Well, what does middle management know about storytelling? Look, in the corporate level is all about staying inside that corporate bubble and succeeding and getting to the top or wherever you want to go. But the people that are making films, for instance, films, television, whatever, they're not in that corporate bubble. They don't have any interest in that corporate bubble. What they want is they're outside making their product that this bubble is going to then sell and exploit across many different mediums. But the idea that this bubble and the people that are making your film and television are somehow separate, and that this executive branch knows fuck all about them making movies or TV is kind of absurd. And yet the people now at Disney more so than ever, the people that are making these things, like, say, Kevin Feige and everyone at Marvel, Louis Esposito and Victoria Alonso, let's say those people then suddenly have to deal with some middle manager. What the fuck does the person who's over here have to tell Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios that are over here making the things making in their dream factories, the things that this corporate structure needs? Like, one thing that corporate doesn't want to know about is if you make a story that's less than good. They don't understand that. And then what happens is you're J.J. Abrams and you make Force Awakens. Then suddenly, Force Awakens made $2 billion. Now, no one ever really thought twice. Why did that happen? Why was Force Awakens so successful? No, they don't care. They just know it made $2 billion. So now they're going to assume, corporations assume, because why wouldn't they, that the next Star Wars movie that they're going to get is just going to be like Force Awakens and make another $2 billion. Because from a corporate standpoint, they're just like, oh, we made a new Star Wars movie and it made $2 billion. We're going to make another Star Wars movie and it's going to make $2 billion. And a third Star Wars movie, and of course that one's going to make $2 billion. That's what it looks like on a spreadsheet. But nobody ever takes into account, because a corporation can't, whether the story is good or not. Does it have truth? Does it convey what the audience wants from that story? A corporation assumes, well, why wouldn't it? Well, I would ask the corporation, well, why would it? What are you doing to assure that the story that you're telling, which is translated into the product that you want to sell, that literally drives your cruise business, your theme park business, your merchandise business, your apparel business, whatever it is? You'd think that the corporate area would be wanting to oversee what the content of the story is. They don't know fuck all about storytelling. They don't know how to make movies. They can tell you if what they saw was good or not. And even then, they can only tell you whether they thought it was good or not. They don't know whether objectively this is a good movie and this is the course that we should pursue. So storytelling, good storytelling, is great. Bad storytelling is wrought with peril. If you're a company like Disney or a major studio or anywhere that's relying upon great storytelling, if you tell bad stories, which is another thing that's not, how do you quantify that? What does that mean, bad stories? Come on, Rob, all stories are subjective. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not subjective. There is objectivity in great storytelling, the way stories are told. As a matter of fact, here's an article from Forbes, and this was from June 18th, 2015. From Forbes, by the way. And Nick Morgan wrote this story. And again, I wanted to read this because it relates back to leadership and business. Five common rookie storytelling mistakes. These are 5 storytelling mistakes. In trying for shock value, they deprive their listeners of interest. Rookie storytellers want to shock their audience. Perhaps it's the fear of losing their audiences, or perhaps it's a diet of too many long-form TV shows where the writers feel the need to introduce shocker after shocker in order to keep us watching for hours and hours and hours. Whatever the case, I see the result all the time, the sudden veer in one direction or another without any kind of preparation, like the TV writer who suddenly reveals that a character has been dead for the entire series, or that it was all a dream, or the like. But what makes a speech, like a story, interesting over its entire length is the tension between fulfillment of expectation and the twist on a convention. In other words, you want to signal where you're headed so your audience can have the pleasure of anticipating it. Deprive them of that pleasure, and they have little reason to hang in there for the long haul with you. Elizabeth and I have been rewatching Game of Thrones. And it's very interesting to watch Game of Thrones now, knowing where it's going to go and knowing what's going to happen. And I would dare say Game of Thrones is absolutely one of the greatest television shows, if perhaps not the greatest television show ever made. However, it makes a lot of big mistakes. I would say the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones, season 2, people say, well, it's a little slow, but I'd say the first 4 seasons of Game of Thrones are pretty impeccable. Now, going back and watching the show all the way through, seasons 5 and 6 start to make some missteps. But overall, especially binge watching them all at once, overall, do I think that the Tyrells, the Dorne storyline, and the House of Black and White storyline are underserved, especially according to the books? Absolutely. But I would say that the end of season 6 in particular is redeemed by the last 2 episodes. Maybe a little conventional, but also very, very satisfying. And if you ended Game of Thrones with the last shot in season 6, which shows Daenerys and her Dothraki hordes and her Unsullied in 1,000 ships, coming across the water, and you see the dragon's white frame cut to black done, you could have ended the show there, because it basically gives you the idea or the impression that you kind of know what's going to happen. And like this previous article says, you need to ask your audience a question. You need to keep them engaged. Well, Game of Thrones is called Game of Thrones. That's the first book. And then the overall thing is the idea, it's a song of ice and fire. Well, the title alone, Game of Thrones, who wins that game? And I think one of the amazing things that I was just talking with Mike Bodden about this today, one of the amazing things, one of the biggest missteps of what happened at the end of Game of Thrones is that the king the person who is crowned king hasn't been somebody that's been playing the game. And some people would say, well, Rob, that's kind of the point, that the person that winds up on the Iron Throne is not who you would expect. And I would say, well, that's great. I have no problem with that. The problem is the person who winds up there shouldn't be there based on the story that we've been told. Now, again, you have to allow an audience a certain amount of expectation in knowing where you're going to go. But I think that the problem with Game of Thrones, and some people like it, I understand it's a divisive topic. I personally don't. I feel that the last 4, I used to think it was 3, but we'll go through this rewatch, I'm realizing it's the last 4 episodes of Game of Thrones. It goes off the rails because it subverts expectations, but subverts them in a way that's just not good. Not good. It doesn't work, especially with what the rest of the show has been about. You can watch it and go, oh, that could happen. But within the context of the Game of Thrones, the Song of Ice and Fire, the conclusion of that, of all 8 years, all 8 seasons, more than 8 years, it simply doesn't work. And I think that diminishes the series as a whole, which is too bad because at least, I mean, from a production standpoint, it's a staggering achievement. But they make many, many missteps, especially in season 7 and 8. Anyway, number 2 here is, in a desire to be authentic, they give us too much information. None of us is interested in each other's stories, alas, as we are in our own. So remember the iron rule of detail. If it's not absolutely necessary for the comprehension of your main message, take it out. We want to have the straight stuff, but light. We don't care about the 7 different kinds of banana blight. We only care whether or not our fruit will be delivered on time and at a reasonable price. 3, in a desire to interest a wide audience, they fail to go deep. The paradox inherent in great storytelling is that if you do it right, we'll listen to you nearly forever. We can't get enough. When a story is well told, like Netflix's House of Cards or HBO's Game of Thrones, remember this article was written in 2015, we can't wait for the next season. We devour it when it comes, and we form fan clubs to get us through the wait until the next series. That's because those kinds of stories have big enough stakes and deep enough characters. We care about them and their trials, and we want to know what happens to them. Indeed, we tell stories beyond the canonical through fan fiction. We want more so much that we make more ourselves. 4, in a fear of self-disclosure, they fail to tell us the most important things. It's hard to go deep with a character because to do so means testing them severely and showing them at their best and worst. At moments of extreme struggle, failure, and uncertainty. Those are the embarrassing moments and the ones we instinctively shy away from. But those are the ones the rest of us want to hear about. We humans are a bit perverse like that. Number 5. In a wish to appear successful, they hide their failures. A special trap of mistake number 4, hiding failure, is the signal most disengaging mistake speakers make. They stand up in front of an audience, having been introduced as the best salesperson in the Western Hemisphere for 3 years in a row, and then proceed to tell us how amazing they are and how they did it. But that's not what we care about. We want to know that they failed and how they kept going when they did. That is authenticity and the stuff of speech-making magic. Don't make these mistakes in your presentations. Take the course and learn how to avoid them. I made them all as I learned public speaking, so you don't have to. And what's interesting is this all, like the previous article, the Harvard article, this Forbes article, again, is all about business and how important storytelling is in business. And there's even another article, and I won't read it, but it's the top 4 mistakes that make business leaders awful storytellers. Kind of variations on a theme. Now I've got 2 different articles. And what's interesting is, one is from a website called careerauthors.com, and the other is a website called Enigma. And I wanted to pull these because I have not, I have not read them, but they're the same article. At least they have the same headline. One is by Richard Crevolin, and the other is, well, I don't know. It doesn't say. But the Career Authors one starts out by saying, here are the biggest storytelling mistakes by Richard Crevolin. The bait has to taste good to the fish, not the fisherman. The biggest mistake that writers make is that they are telling the wrong stories. Too often I see my clients, aspiring writers, tell stories that they think are important, but they really aren't. In other words, they tell stories that are important to them, but these stories really aren't applicable to their readers. Sort of a you had to be there story. So tell stories that your readers want to hear. Stories that directly affect their lives, or aspirational stories about the lives they wish they were living. Either way, they must be stories that your readers want to read. 2, your target reader listens only one radio station, WIFM or IIFM, What's in it for me? This is essentially a variation of number 1 above. Too often we focus on what we want to say instead of what your target reader wants and needs to know. So every time you create a new story or a book or a script, before you share it, ask yourself, does this help your reader in some way, entertain them or intrigue them or educate them, or hopefully all of the above? Number 3, it's your job to make the worst thing possible happen to your main character. See Game of Thrones. I work with a lot of writers every year who hire me as a consultant, and here's what I see over and over again. They are too nice. In other words, they need to be crueler when it comes to their characters and their situations in their stories. My clients always tend to make life too easy for their heroes instead of making their existence more difficult. So be a nice person in real life, but when you're writing, be a sadist in terms of what you do to your favorite character as he or she valiantly attempts to achieve their goal. I absolutely agree with that, by the way. 4, it's impossible to find the heart of something if it's too big. Too often we try and appeal to everybody and end up appealing to nobody. Nobody gets in a car and just drives around. We get in a car to go somewhere specific. Focus as specifically as possible on one target and own that market, and then you can always build from there. Number 5, avoid bland narratives and instead tell compelling stories. You'd think that would be an easy one, but you'd be wrong. A narrative is any string of events placed together, but stories are narratives that have emotional content. Always remember to include dramatic, emotional content in your story, since that is what people will remember and what will engage them. We're emotional creatures, not data-based fact collectors. Number 6, create a constructive support group to foster your growth as a writer. No one starts out as a master storyteller. It takes time to develop your class or your craft. Malcolm Gladwell's 10,000 hours till mastery applies here. Realize it takes a long time. See the big picture and then find coaches or teachers or consultants or a writing group or like-minded individuals who are not your loved ones or family to be your beta readers and give you the feedback that you need to grow. Number 7, enjoy the act of writing. You can't control if your book will be a bestseller or not, but you can control if your story and your language and your rewrites and ultimately when you release your book into the world. So focus on that which you can control, and most importantly, take pleasure in the act of putting together a beautiful sentence and take joy in constructing a great scene and revel in the process, and you'll be happy no matter what happens to your book. I think all of those are good things. And the author here, it has an about the author, and it says, Richard Crivolin is an award-winning screenwriter, author, playwright, and professor. A graduate of Yale University, Richard went on to earn a master's degree in screenwriting at UCLA School of Cinema and Television and a master's degree in playwriting and fiction from USC. He regularly works as a story consultant, script doctor, and brand narrative coach. So there you go. So I was talking to Elizabeth the other night. We were taking a walk, and she says, because we're watching Game of Thrones, we should write an epic fantasy tale like Game of Thrones. But that must be like really hard. And I said, well, it's not that hard. I mean, obviously the actual writing of it and finishing it, George R. R. Martin hasn't even finished it yet. And I think I read Game of Thrones in 96 when it first came out. Wasn't that when it first came out? I had a hardcover copy of the first book. So it's 2021 and he's got 2 more books to go. But one of the things I told her was, I used an example. I was just making shit up off the top of my head as we were walking. And she goes, well, how would you start a fantasy? You got to start a fantasy with your main character, whatever your character is. And I threw out this idea that there was a young boy, and it was his birthday, and he lived in a fishing village. And we know that this is our main protagonist. That character's going to go through something, and maybe we don't know what it is. Maybe we don't set it up right away, but we just tell the story to start with an epic fantasy. You start with this character. Who is this character? Where did he come from? Who were his parents? Who are his grandparents? Do they live in this town their whole lives? What is this town that they live in? And in my scenario, I said, okay, when he's supposed to be a fisherman, so he has certain skills, like maybe on his birthday, he's going to be given a spear, and he's no longer a net fisherman, he's a spear fisherman, and he has to show that he's adept with and it's kind of like you're not wielding a lightsaber, you're wielding some kind of a spear that you're fishing with, and you have to be able to get 10 fish on this spear, whatever. That's what it is. And then it's like you explain every aspect of why is this community into fishing. Do they have fish gods that they've worshipped for thousands of years? You go through and you deal with every possible aspect of the town. At the same time, you're juxtaposing that with your main character's birthday and what he's doing before he has to take this test. Maybe he's full of anxiety because he doesn't want to let his family down. Maybe his family is the best fishermen and fisherwomen in the village, whatever. But it's a simple thing, but all the detail, all the world building that's coming out of just this asking questions about your main character, well, then you're off to the races. I mean, one of the things that I was talking again to Mike Bodden about this, one of the things I hated, for instance, about Star Trek Into Darkness. So you're going to bring back the character of Khan, okay? We know that the universe, the Star Trek universe, the Kelvin universe was the same as ours until the Narada went back in time, and there was the incursion by Nero's ship, the Narada, and that broke off the timelines. That essentially created an alternate universe. I'll buy into that. Okay. It's kind of Star Trekian. It's fine with me. But the thing is, the Khan, our Khan and their Khan, are the same Khan. The Botany Bay, the DY-100 class Botany Bay lifted off from our Earth and their Earth at the same time. It was drifting through space, but in their universe, it was discovered by somebody other than the Enterprise. So far, so good. Well, the writers who are writing Khan have to ask yourself, okay, who is this character? Who is Khan? What do we know about Khan? Well, we know everything we learned in Space Seed. At one point, Khan ran a quarter of the world's. He was the ruler from India throughout the Middle East. It was Khan Noonien Singh, a genetically engineered Superman with superior strength and superior intellect, was the de facto leader of a quarter of Earth's population at one point, which makes him, as he says in Wrath of Khan, I was a prince with power over millions. Okay? And he's got genetically engineered followers, and they go into the Botany Bay. They get frozen, cryogenically frozen. The ship goes off. They're going to presumably go somewhere, find another planet to live on, although in 1996 there was no way to understand or know where any of those planets might possibly be, so how could you get to them? But that's neither here nor there. But the whole point is that in the course of this movie, the character of Khan is never written to act like he was once the dictator of a quarter of our world's population. So the entire time, you don't really know why Benedict Cumberbatch, sure, he's miscast as Khan, but on the other hand, it's not like he does a bad job. But the problem with that movie is this character is not acting like we've been told he was. And then again, they do things like, well, there's the subplot of how his followers have all been put into these torpedoes for whatever reason. Have you ever heard of that happening ever in life? No. So the idea that, well, he's the Peter Weller's admiral is sequestered away Khan's followers in these torpedoes that he's now sending over to the Enterprise. What? There's no biofilter? Like, as soon as you brought something over, like, it would be scanned by whatever. And so these are just extrapolations that we make. But the idea that, yep, we're going to put people in these torpedoes, and Khan's not going to act like he was once rule the quarter of the world's population. And so for me, I watch this and I'm like, I don't believe any of this. All of this to me is gobbledygook. So it's not good storytelling. Now, astute viewers know this. You can recognize this and go, why would you possibly put human beings in torpedoes? Or everything we know in the Star Trek universe, in that film, literally, Khan Noonien Singh is in a one-man vehicle that he uses to attack Starfleet. We're supposed to believe that there is enough power and energy or whatever in this one-man vehicle that it beams Khan from there to the Klingon homeworld? Well, knowing Star Trek, one of the things, as the viceroy of verisimilitude, you can believe in the transporter, but you can only believe in the transporter because it has had limitations put on it. And when the transporter can transport you to a foreign planet that is hundreds of light years away or whatever, if it can do that, why do you have starships? But the real question is, where does a small fighter, presumably transporters, you needed the Enterprise computer. Imagine how large, how vast the data storage capacity of a Constitution-class starship would be. I mean, we're in the 23rd century, how big those hard drives would be and how fast they would be. So that's why you need something that large, like a starship, to be able to power the transporter in order to make it work in the first place. Well, so when Khan beams away, by the way, who thought that was a good idea? In Star Trek history, who's like, yeah, why don't we have Khan just beam to the Klingon? I mean, in Star Trek 1, they showed Kirk and Scotty beaming from Delta Vega onto the Enterprise, which made no sense at all, because anyone who has any cursory understanding of how the transporter works, first of all, so your transporter beam, is it traveling faster than light? Because it would need to be, because the Enterprise is racing away from Delta Vega. How does a transporter beam make it to the Enterprise? Is that beam traveling through hyperspace or something? I mean, if the Enterprise is at warp, you're never going to catch it, whatever beam you're on. You know, you're going the speed of light's it, buddy. So how are you supposed to beam somebody onto a moving starship? Now, when I'm watching Into Darkness, a lot of people would say, like, oh, Rob, that's a little nitpicky. I'm like, it isn't nitpicky, because Star Trek has given us how the transporters worked through hundreds of hours of television and movies. This transporter has very strict rules. That's why we believe in it. But if you subvert those rules and just say, yeah, he's going to beam from here to the Klingon homeworld, you're like, how could he plot those coordinates? You know, beaming, just like traveling through hyperspace, ain't like dust and crops, boy. And for anybody who has a rudimentary understanding or a love of fictional universe, watching J.J. Abrams movies can be a singularly painful experience, because he throws all of that out. He works in universes and tosses their continuity out to serve himself, and his continuity and what he wants to have done is not smart. I don't mean this just to rail on modern Star Trek either. But the same's true of, Star Wars, Doctor Who, whatever. I have no problem if you want to swap Doctor Who's gender and make Doctor Who a woman. Just give me great stories that I can believe in. And when I say great stories, I'm watching Doctor Who. I understand if I want to have a robot canine, literally named K9, I can do that. And anyone can come up with a great story if they want to. But now the problem is, the people that own these franchises are just like, this person has a good track record, and I see on his spreadsheet, we should hire this person. Well, there's nothing in the corporate hierarchy that where they're supposed to understand what's a good movie and what's a bad movie. They're just like, this guy, here's the numbers, this looks good, we'll hire him. Have you watched any of his movies? I don't need to. But still, it comes down to good and bad storytelling. And we're getting a lot of it all at the same time. Good and bad, sometimes in the same movie. And the real question is why? Why? Because when you tell bad stories, your business or whatever you're doing is lost. I've got one more article. It's a different article with the same title. This is the one that comes from Enigma. I just want to throw this on here. How to fail at storytelling. 7 common mistakes. We've told you before that all of us humans are natural-born storytellers. We tell stories all the time. We've been doing it since we were small kids. But as soon as we try and tell stories in a business context, we freeze. We try too hard, and we end up doing a natural thing in an artificial way. Here are 7 common mistakes in business storytelling you sure don't want to make. Isn't it interesting? I just want to point out that I look up storytelling, and some of the things at the top on Google are these articles about business and storytelling. Which is ironic, considering I find people at the corporate level who are controlling our movies and television, the content in them. They're like the last people that you want. And yet, with the corporate structure that is befalling these larger and larger entertainment conglomerates, the goodness of storytelling is going to be lost. So, 1, announce you're about to tell a story. Okay, so you've heard all around that storytelling is the new magic tool to engage your audience. We know that our brains are wired to live stories rather than process them as information. So you've decided to leverage storytelling in your management style. Every time you have to communicate something, you begin with, let me tell you a story. Remember, when you're in a business context, chances are that your audience will think you're about to say something not important or get their attention on their smartphone or roll their eyes thinking, oh, this storytelling hype with managers. You need to be more subtle. For the magic of storytelling to happen, you have to casually slip into storytelling mode without telling an audience. Try formulas such as, I just remembered something funny. I knew this girl or guy who used to. I've heard something very interesting. You know, insert person, place, or brand here. Well, what you don't know is. 2, keep a deep suspense. Great stories have a suspense, right? You've decided to leverage the power of storytelling in your management style, but you want to give it a Hitchcockian touch. So you tell your stories with lots of suspense, hoping to keep your audience immersed in wanting more. Well, you should be careful. Remember, you're in a business context. Your story has to tell a message, not entertain your people. Using too much suspense might upset your audience, especially if they don't know where you're going. The important thing here is to make a point first and then tell a story to illustrate it. It allows the audience to give context to your story. It will keep them engaged throughout the story because they'll want to understand a link between your point and the story. Abstractify your story. You're okay to use stories in your job, but since you're in a business context, you feel you have to be serious and professional. In an effort to make it universal, you make it lean. You don't get into too much into details. You're very rational about the outline. Chances are you'll get rid of the context and cut out the description. You know what? Fuck all this. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of reading these articles. I'm going to prove a point. We're going to play a little game. We're going to play a little game, and I'm going to prove a point. Every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. Are you ready? All right. You are going to help me. And how you're going to help me? This goes out to all of you who have microphones and cameras. You know the drill. I'm going to bring people on to this. Now, I'm going to ask you, if you have been on this show before, to not call in, not dial in. But if you have, so I want somebody new, hopefully people that we haven't met before. But I'm going to play a game with you. All I need you to do is come on the show, and I'm going to prove to everyone that everybody has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. All you have to do is listen. And in the process, I'm going to turn you into a great storyteller. I'm going to turn you into a great storyteller right now, right here, live on this channel. Hey, maybe not. This might not work. Who knows? But if it does work, it could be a lot of fun. So, I am going to see. So right now, if you've got a good camera and a good microphone, I'm going to drop this link into the chat. And I want, if you've been on the show before, please give someone else a chance. I'm going to put this in. It's now in the chat. Here's the link. And if you want to come on board and play this game with me, then we'll see. We'll see who shows up. Maybe no one's going to show up. I mean, we've talked about storytelling. I've talked about bad storytelling. I've talked about good storytelling. But if you tell a bad story, you will lose. You will lose. And that's problematic. You're always going to lose. And unfortunately, I don't think Hollywood has quite learned this lesson yet, because as corporations are running businesses, they know less and less and less about how to tell a good story or how to make it all work. And I think since I don't have somebody here yet, we'll see if maybe no one's going to jump on. Maybe doesn't want to. Oh, wait, now someone is here. Oh, Terrier. All right, Terrier. I know Terrier. I'm going to bring Terrier, our good friend. I'm going to bring him on this show. Hopefully he's here. There, you're. Terrier, do you have headphones? Because we can hear me. We can hear me on the. I'm going to bring him on. Let's see. Okay, so I'm going to put Terrier in. Terje is from Norway, and all right, Terje's connecting headphones. I'm going to bring him in. Let me put him on. I'm going to put him on the frame for us so we can see him. I'm going to expand him, and I'm going to now. Hopefully, this will work. This will work. So, first of all, Terje, you ready? Can you hear me? I can still hear myself, Terje. If you can hear me. Oh, okay. I'll keep. Hang on. Then you wait there. You wait there. You hang on. Hang out and wait. Don't say anything. I've got Rocky here. So Rocky, can you hear me? Okay, I'm going to bring you on our show. Okay, can you want to come on, Rocky? And there's Terje, but Terje's waiting. I'm going to bring Rocky on, and Terje, you wait. We'll have you there. I'll have you come on after we have Rocky, and I'm going to do that. Let me add Rocky in here, and we're going to play a game. Rocky, are you ready? It's going to be like a war game. Shall we play a game? Okay, so first of all, I'm bringing on Rocky. Here's Rocky. Rocky, where are you? First of all, welcome to Robservations.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I'm from Canada. I'm in Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada.
Medicine Hat, Alberta, Canada.
That's
all right,
correct.
now let me ask you this: what do you do?
I am a family law lawyer.
Ooh, so you've heard all kinds of stories.
Well, yes, I'm accustomed to dealing with other people's family drama. Yes.
Right. So you've heard now. As a lawyer, you have to be a good storyteller.
Yes. I do. Yes. I do. Yes. I frame stories all the time, hopefully to my clients' benefits. Sure. Why not? Yeah. I'm also an avid comic collector, and I review comic books all the time too. So I love story. I love stories. Yeah.
Okay. Would you consider yourself a good storyteller?
Well, at the risk of sounding egotistical, I think I am a good storyteller. I'm not a writer by occupation, obviously, but I love telling a good yarn. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Well, I'll bet you I can make you tell us a great story right away, right now.
All right. Sure.
I'm about a random happenstance.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. I want you to think back to the first time that you ever really got in trouble as a child.
Okay. Yeah.
Do you have something in mind?
Yes, I do. Yes.
Okay, you're going to tell us about when you really got in trouble as a child. First of all, set the stage. How old were you?
I was 5 years old, and it was my second day of kindergarten, and it was my second day of kindergarten, and I was a little frustrated. I was actually held back a year because I had I had speech problems. I had problems speaking, and well, do you want me to tell you? Do you want me to tell you how I got in trouble, or do you want me to stop there?
No, we're gonna get there. But okay, now were you aware that you had speech problems? Did you know it, and did it bother you?
It didn't bother. Well, I was aware of it because I was put into speech therapy when I was 4 years old. I was injured when I was younger. I was burned with. I suffered some burns on my body from some boiling water, and I guess it traumatized me, and it just impaired my sister is the only one that could understand some of what I said, and so when I was 5 years old, I was just starting speech therapy, and it was, again, I got in trouble because on my second day I came home and I discovered how to swear very well.
Your second day of kindergarten.
Yes, I came home and I was I mispronounced a lot of swear words, but it was in my attempt to pronounce them correctly that I got in trouble because I was successful.
Okay, now so you're in kindergarten. Did you like school? Did you like being in kindergarten?
I did, yes, very much so, yes.
And what was your relationship with your parents like?
It Excellent. I actually my was excellent. I was always close to my mom. My mom was always very close to me. Still is. She still always asks me how my day is, even when I call her, even after all these years. And it's a good relationship with my parents. Yes.
And did you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I got a younger sister, 2 years younger than me. Rhonda's her name. She helped my parents often understand me when I was younger and trying to talk. And I had a younger brother who wasn't born at the time, but he's 7 years younger than me. Yes.
And what about your teacher in kindergarten? Was it a man or a woman?
It was a woman.
Did you like her? And what was her name? Do you remember?
Her name was Miss Terlesky. Yes, Miss Terlesky, and I remember her well. She was very compassionate, very kind.
Was she older or younger? Was she a younger teacher, like in her 20s or 30s, or was she older, like in her 50s or 60s?
She was in her early 50s.
Oh, so she was like a school marm, older teacher.
That's right, very much so. Yeah.
So tell us, set the stage. Tell us about the day you got in trouble. What was that day like?
Well, the day was it was a beautiful day. I had I'd gotten up early. I was excited. I remember we're technically I was 6 blocks from the kindergarten, and it was an experience for me just walking to school. It was the second time. It was the second time I'd ever walked to school by myself, and the day before, my mom got quite worried because she told me when she taught me how to walk across the street, she says, always look both ways before the cars, and always wait for the cars to go by before you cross the street, which is common sense. But I took it so literally that even if no cars were coming by, I had to wait until at least one car went by before I crossed the street.
Okay, I just want to stop you and point out that is a fantastic detail. So suddenly you're telling us this tale, and we're immediately like, you've given us something specific to you. You're now painting, even though it's you're telling us this is a great character. You've now given us a character.
Sure.
Before you see, I love that detail. That's what I'm talking about. Everybody, this is great. So please continue.
Yeah, so I was always detail oriented. Maybe I was told maybe I was a little bit on the spectrum for what today we would call autism. So I went to school, and everyone was great. I was a great time, and a lot of met kids that I would actually grow up with and graduate with 12 years hence, and a lot of swearing, and I just remember a lot of swearing because half of my friends they've remained vulgar throughout this time as I knew them, and I came home and Mom asked me how my day was, and
was it fucking great?
Pretty much, yes. It was it was effing great and the whole 9 yards, and a lot of swearing, and the what I remember the most. This was the first time. Mom cut me off and she said, "Come over here." And she took me to the washroom, and I had absolutely no idea what she was doing. And she began to wash her hands. And then she put me in front of the bathroom mirror. And then she took her hands that were filled with soap, and she literally pushed her hands into my mouth. And it was the first time that I'd ever tasted soap. She literally washed my mouth out with soap. I always, it was funny. I always thought that was an expression, but it was actually true. And it was, and and how naive I was. I really didn't know that what I had done wrong until it was explained to me. And I even to this day, I even said effing. To this day, I said effing when you talk to me, because
yes,
I rarely, I'm not saying my mom traumatized me. I'm just saying that I remember that.
But see, now you didn't know what I was going to ask you.
No.
And I think what you just proved is that you told a unique story that was unique to you, and you added some details like I've never heard of that. I've never heard of a mother, I could imagine her standing behind you, and I saw the image of little you standing in front of the sink basin, your mom's behind you looming, and she's got her hands and sticking hands with So immediately now, all of us watching this show now have, this little tale of young Rocky, second day of kindergarten, learning how to swear, coming home, and getting your mouth washed out with soap. I mean, if you were to write that down, that's a compelling story that we can all, like, I don't know your mother. I don't know much about what it's like to grow up in Canada, but now you just conveyed a story that I now have an image in my mind of a mother using both of her hands to, and young little Rocky, second day of kindergarten, eating soap for the first time.
Yeah.
But that to me, that's a movie scene.
Yeah. It was Zest too. It was Zest. Every time I see a Zest commercial, Zest looks good on, I never think, it's not, it's, I laugh at it. It's funny, but, at the time it didn't,
No, but it was in kindergarten, you remember it, and you've given us there's enough detail there that you've now painted a picture that I think we can all see. Yeah. That's great storytelling. And I think that, and you and I, we've never met before. This is the first time you and I have talked.
Yeah, well, it's funny. A quick thing. You'll appreciate this. A quick digression. I've been collecting comic books since I was for the last 43 years. And I can tell you that it was about a couple of weeks after that she took me to the Mad Hatter's bookstore 2 blocks away. And I got my first bag of comic books. Superboy and the Legion of Superheroes, and
nice.
That started me off being a DC Comics lover, and to this day I review comic books and on a small and I live stream with friends and buddies and stuff, and I watch your show because you're the pop culture guru guy. So I love it. It's great. Good time to be alive.
It is a great time to be alive. Well, Rocky, I want to thank you for coming on the show and telling us a tale, and a good story, And thanks for watching the show. And by the way, are you reading modern comics? Are you reading stuff that comes out now?
Yes, I am. Yes, very much so. Yes.
Any suggestions for anybody, for the audience out there, what people might want to pick up?
Yes, I would suggest reading James Tynion IV, Something is Killing the Children. By Image Comics. It's hopefully that'll be on Netflix someday or Amazon, but it's a fantastic story. Also, Stillwater by Chip Zdarsky is really good. And there's just a whole slew of comics that I could recommend. But and also read if you're watching TV in your life, Invincible, go out and buy the trades, the individual comics for Robert Kirkman's Invincible.
So good.
It's a great comic book. So I'll leave it with those 3 because I could talk forever on comics. So.
Well, listen, Rocky, thank you for being here. I very much appreciate you coming on to this episode of Robservations, and thanks for being an imagination connoisseur.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me. Love your show.
Well, thanks, man. Thanks for being here.
Thanks. All right.
Now, that was very cool. I want to thank Rocky for coming on the show. I'm going to bring back Terrier now. All the way from Norway. And let me just hang on. I'm going to have to, I am going to bring him on. I just need to, of course, actually do that because it takes a little bit of, this is live television and, or live, don't call it, I guess it's not television. It's just live streaming, but it is indeed live. So hang on. I'm going to put him in, coach. And Terrier, can you hear me? Oh, you can hear me. Okay, good. I'm going to put you in. You can hear me. And all right. So, and how first of all, welcome. You are now on Robservations all the way from Norway. Now,
thank you.
Do us a favor once again. Please pronounce your name for everybody at home. You've been in the chats.
Yeah. Well, actually, the way you say it is like it's the proper way for an American to say it because there's no necessity for you to speak like a Norwegian. So I think you're doing when you say Terje or Terje, it's like the way an American would say it. So
Terje.
Yeah, it's perfect.
All right.
Like Andre told you, he told you it was perfect.
Terrier, okay, because I always would say, just jokingly, Terge, because that's what I used to call you. But Terrier's okay. As long as I'm, so I will ask you the same. We've known each other for a while. You know, you came to London with now your ex-wife, Julie.
Yeah. We're separated.
Who's separated? Who's lovely. I would like to ask you the question. You're going to tell us a story too. She's the mother of your child, right? Well, okay. How did you first meet Julie? Tell us the first time you saw her. I want to know. Tell me the tale. Tell me about that day. When did you first meet her?
Okay, that's kind of there's a story there.
At least there's always a story, but you got to set it up. Like, tell me.
Okay.
Start from the beginning. What day was it? What kind of a day was it? Did you have plans that day? What was going on?
It was during the summer of 2008. And I had gone away to this. The best way to like easily describe it is like this health place. It's kind of like a fat camp.
Okay.
Where you go to like get like some help with health issues related to weight. And I've been overweight since like my teenage years, and I've been struggling with weight my entire life. So that was kind of a place to go and see if I could get some help to shed some pounds.
Now, did you make the decision to go on your own, or was this something that a doctor told you should do?
No, I wanted a change.
Okay.
So I contacted the doctors and asked, what can I do? What is there like some help I can get? And that's the thing. They wrote they did a script and wrote the place and applied for me to go there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
so I went there.
Well, hang on a second. I got to ask you about this place.
Yeah.
Was this place far away? Was it in the mountains? Was it in the country? Was it in the middle of the city? What kind? Could it have been in a horror movie, like a David Cronenberg movie? Tell me about this place. What kind of a place was it?
It's in a place in Norway called Hønefoss. And if I translate that into English in a funny way, it's actually called Chicken Falls.
Okay.
So that sounds kind of Twin Peaksy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I went to Chicken Falls to shed some pounds. Yeah.
Now, where was this place located?
Only like 45 minutes away from where I was living
okay.
at the time. Yeah. So I could actually go there, and I stayed there during most of the week, and I went back home in the weekends to like relax and get some time off.
Okay. Now, when you went there, what was it like when you first got there? What were your first impressions of this place? And how many people were there? Was there a lot of people? Was there not many people?
66 people, I believe.
Wow, okay.
And it was a 3-month stay.
Wow, okay, 3 months. So that's a long time, big commitment.
Yeah. With like, you had like 3 sessions of training each week. Each day, sorry. And also other educational stuff with a psychologist, and it was a pretty good thing. Yeah.
Did you
and all covered by Norwegian healthcare?
Oh, well, that's there you go. So take us through a day. Like, what was a day at this at Chicken Falls? What was a day like? What happened when you got up in the morning? Take us through your whole day.
Yeah, you got up at about like 7:30 in the morning, and you went down to breakfast, and then you went and collected. They had like this place where you could get like these small meals that you were supposed to take during the day, like yogurts and fruit, and you kind of packed your like a small lunchbox. And then you went to the first physical training hour, and then you had like about an hour of rest before like the next session, which was probably more like a lecture or something. And then you had lunch, and then you had another hour, and then you had like more physical training. And then there was like another hour, and then you had the third session of like training.
What kind of meals did they serve? Like for breakfast and lunch? Do you remember?
Yeah, like just regular, like like bread and ham and cheese and some fruit, maybe some like whole wheat, like granola stuff. Basically just really healthy stuff. A lot of vegetables.
Now, did you
And
like the food that they served, or were you kind of like,
no, it was actually quite good.
Oh,
Quite
okay.
good. They had this one thing that I really hated where they like mixed like cucumbers with mangoes and had it like a side to some meat, and that was like the horror when that mango cucumber salad came. I wanted to throw that shit in the wall, man.
Did you eat it?
No.
All right. Okay.
Cucumbers and mangoes, they don't want to mix. No.
All right. So, and
Yeah.
the kind of physical training, was it weight training? Were you on a treadmill? Did you lift weights, or what was that like?
A lot of different stuff. It was like maybe you did like a long walk in the woods, or you took your bicycle out riding, or you had like yoga, Pilates, and you could have like this called circle training where there was like different stations located around in a gym hall, and you did like several different, like types of exercises.
Now, since we're talking about meeting Julie, were you looking around at the same time? Do you see some ladies? Maybe you're like, hey, maybe I'll go do yoga next to her.
You would be amazed at the amount of phys ed that happened during that stay. Can you imagine like 66 people getting in there? They're training, they're eating healthy, they're like feeling like they're having like a second wind in their life, no matter what age they were.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of hanky panky going on.
All right. All right.
Yeah. But well, I remember the first time I saw Julie. It was she had just gotten an A on one of her exams, so she was just jumping around all the time outside this main building, and that's the first time I noticed her.
Jumping around.
And I was like, "Oh, you're jumping around," and I was just like, "Oh, she looks happy."
That's it? Just happy? But I mean, you noticed her. What else were you thinking?
Not much. When I got there, I hadn't had a girlfriend. I'd been overweight all my life. I just didn't have a lot of experience in that region, so I was kind of just like I was just looking around. It was early on, so I hadn't really gotten to the part where I felt like better about myself and had more confidence. But that came a little bit later. So I noticed her, and the where it really clicked was at some point where she and some other girls were like sitting in this room where they actually had like a projector, which they used for some of the lectures, but you could use it for like watching television in the nighttime, and they were like sitting there watching Desperate Housewives. Yeah.
And did you go in and join them?
I went in and joined them, and I was like the only male there with like 4 or 5 other females. And there was just like this a start of something, some chemistry thing going on. And that really like just evolved during the stay, because we were there 3 months, of course, in this kind of bubble.
Could you be a little bit more specific? Was there anything that specifically you remember when you say like a bit of chemistry? Did it start out with you guys stealing looks at one another? Were you laughing at each other's jokes? How did you know that there was chemistry?
Yeah. She found me very funny, and I always like when people find me funny, because I try to be a funny guy.
You're pretty
So
funny.
I liked that. And it was like this one time where someone commented that I had smelled her hair in the lunch queue.
And did you? Had you?
I did. And someone came over to me and said, "I saw you smell her hair."
See, what a great detail. And that's, I think that's something that not a lot of men admit to, but we love it. I think that there's something about like when I was in New Zealand and Australia, women in New Zealand and Australia wear different kinds of perfume than we have in America. There's a much, I don't know how you describe it, less artificial, and more of a more of a musky, but isn't musky. It's been, I would walk around, like you'd walk down the streets of like Sydney, and women would just smell lovely. Same in France too, by the way. Like I was in Nice, I was surprised. I'm like, oh my God. And I think that it's not something we ever tell anybody because it's kind of embarrassing, but I love that I love the fact that somebody busted you for this.
Yeah.
See,
and also, you know, that triggered something when you talked about perfume. That actually triggered another story about me trying to get her to like me, because I did this really sneaky trick where I was like, I told her, oh, I need to get myself a new cologne, a new smell. Maybe you could come along and help me find what smells best on me. So I actually got her to go to the perfume store and like pick the smell that she thought was nicest on me.
Now, did you do this while you were still in this facility?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. So you
could go, like, it wasn't like you were locked inside an insane asylum for the overweight. So you could go out.
So you actually made her come out on a date with you.
Kind of.
Yeah.
We went shopping for perfume.
Now, how long from the time you first saw her jumping around because she got an A on her exam, from the time that you went to go get this cologne, how many days had passed? What's the time frame in there?
Like a couple of weeks, I think.
All right. Slowly developing.
And we didn't actually become a couple until like a year later. So this was really a slow burner of getting to know each other.
That's great. Now, since she was there and you were both there, were you both helping each other out with your progress moving through this 3-month program?
Yeah. I have to say it was really easy to do it when you were there, because you're basically living inside like this bubble. It's like it's kind of like, I'd say it's probably like being on like 24/7 on a film set. You're kind of living inside this kind of made up bubble of stuff. And the outside world doesn't really matter that much, but it's really more difficult to like maintain this regiment when you come outside into like the real world.
Right. Hang on. Elizabeth sent me a message and I didn't see what it is. I don't know if she's she reminded me of something. But so what I love about, again, this story that you're telling, it's the details. You know, it's the details. Like, you remember that she got a good exam, so she was jumping around, and that was the first time you saw her. And these are the things that make stories great. You know, and like you said, asking you a question, I just reminded you of something. I mean, the idea that you were being sneaky and you got her to come out with you and get the right cologne. I mean, these are the kind of details that I don't think people necessarily understand, that everybody has stories, and the details, like really everybody has a story about meeting a significant other, but it's the details. Like, you have a great story. That's a great tale.
And believe me, I berate myself often, because I've so many times thought that there is like a small limited TV series just waiting to happen about all these people at the fat camp. You could not imagine the characters I saw over there. It is amazing.
I'm sure already somebody watching this channel is like writing this down right now.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I want to thank you for coming on. We've been friends for the better part of 2 decades now, I think. And it's good to see you. By the way, you did send in a super chat to me today.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read it with you here. You said, have you ever tried the Game of Thrones interactive story game from Telltale? It's great. It could have been a series. Check it out. It's about 9 hours of great Game of Thrones. I have never played that. I've heard about it, but I've never played it.
I think you can get it on the PlayStation, and if you can't, most of those Telltale games are so kind of easygoing,
right,
that you can get them on like an Android or an iPhone, and it's perfect for just like playing games like whenever you have like a moment of free time, because it runs like an interactive story where you can do some minor list of actions, and you can like affect the dialogue, but the Game of Thrones one I found really good because it's a really engaging story, and it, like I say, it runs for quite a few hours.
Wow, that definitely sounds right up my alley. So,
check it out.
I'll check it out. Well, thank you for coming on, man. I appreciate it, and thank you very much for telling the story. Me. Absolutely, this was great.
Sorry about the technical issues in the beginning. I haven't done this before, and it's on my Android phone, so I had to find like this setting thing where I could choose my headphones. Usually they just connect automatically.
Oh,
so
no worries. It worked out fine. It was great. Well, Terrier, thank you for being here, sir. And we will see you again. It was great to have Terrier. And once again, look, every single person has a story to tell. And we heard from Rocky in Canada and Terrier from Norway. So we are truly an international community here. I want to thank them both for coming on and sharing their stories. And 2 good stories, actually. 2 great stories. I thought that was great. So let's talk about what you guys want to talk about. Jeffrey Brown writes in. Jeffrey Brown writes in and says, "Hello, Rob. It's me again, Jeff. Writing you another letter about something on my mind. This time it's been about Star Wars and Star Wars and Star Wars fandom. First, I want to say I never grew up with this as a kid in the 90s or a teen of the 2000s. The first Star Wars movie I ever saw as a preteen in 1999 was Star Wars The Phantom Menace with a classmate of mine in a theater at another town. His mom invited me and my brother, I remember. Anyways, my friend Clint was super into Star Wars, and I wasn't. I remember watching The Phantom Menace and not getting into it. Sure, the movie had Samuel L. Jackson in it, but he wasn't doing his normal thing of cursing people out and calling them motherfuckers like he did in Pulp Fiction. Yeah, I watched that movie as a kid. And in A Time to Kill and The Long Kiss Goodnight with Gina Davis. And Liam Neeson wasn't doing that high level of acting I remember from seeing him in Sam Raimi's Darkman, Rob Roy, and Batman Begins. I remember watching that one in theaters in 2005, and Natalie Portman not really being as interesting as she was in Leon the Professional. I just remember not being into the concept of the Jedis. I hated Jar Jar because he came across as a black stereotype to me. At a young age, it's something even I could tell. Darth Maul looked cool, but died in such a lame way I wasn't interested in the life of a young Darth Vader as a kid. I remember not liking the droids and pre-Palpatine, so not much there to capture my imagination. I was more into Marvel, DC, and Image Comics, cartoons, and characters to ever get invested in Star Wars, so I left it alone. I had no idea about the Star Wars fandom until the newer Disney movies came out, and seeing all the people who love this thing get excited and hearing about all the boomers who grew up with it talk about what they liked from the original trilogy. I saw a lot of stuff go down on Twitter, and the aftermath of what happened on The Force Awakens didn't live up to their high expectations, but then came the harassment that happened to John Boyega and Kelly Marie Tran from racist fans on both Twitter and YouTube, from people like Geeks and Gamers and the dregs of the Phantom Menace, who also had their fans and followers attack people. They've attacked trans people, black people who are fans, and many other queer people on Twitter. Like all of this, it made me stay clear of Star Wars because of the toxic fandom. Then another red flag was what happened to Christina Ariel and how racist Star Wars fans attacked her on Twitter and YouTube, leading the charge against her. It made me question, are all the fans of this property just as bad as the Zack Snyder cultists? Should I just not bother with Star Wars if fans are this toxic? Like these days, I'm curious as to why older fans than me are so protective of this franchise and these characters, that they're violent and volatile towards changes to it, or anyone new who's not a cis white male just watching these new movies for the first time. Anyway, I was asking around in the chat about their suggestions for good Star Wars stuff. I asked about the comics, the video games, and other stuff because I want to check out The Mandalorian and maybe read some of the new comics. People like Louise Sparrow keep suggesting I should check out the original trilogy, but I'm still a bit hesitant because of what I know about the fandom. Hell, I know you, Rob, and the people over at Midnight's Edge have negative things to say about the new movies, and that doesn't give me confidence to get into Star Wars. You all keep suggesting that people should watch the old stuff because it was the best thing ever. Hell, I've never even bought the action figures of a Star Wars character. All I have is a Funko Pop of Captain Phasma. Anyway, am I missing something about Star Wars that doesn't grab me? Should I just stay away from it because of toxic fans on Twitter and YouTube? Thanks for reading my letter, Rob. I hope I don't come across as a Debbie Downer, but I'm just an outsider looking at all this because it's not really my thing. Well, Jeffrey, I'm going to take you at face value, and I want to thank you for writing in. First of all, here's the thing. Yes, there is toxicity everywhere, really, not just on the internet or just with fans. And I want to point out that I have had very good experiences with a lot of people on the web. Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers reached out to me once and asked me to come on his channel. And there were a lot of people that said to me, oh, don't do it. Don't do it. And I have to say that Jeremy from Geeks and Gamers was delightful to stream with, and I really enjoyed streaming with him. And he's never been anything but nice and cordial and polite to me. And one of the things that, and by the way, I am not in any way, shape, or form defending. I'm not my brother's keeper. All I can do is when I'm afforded respect or people show me respect, I can respect them. But just because I stream with someone, I don't have to necessarily condone everything that they do or not condone it. All I know is that when I've been very lucky that I've met a lot of people across the internet from all different corners of the internet, and for the most part, my experience has been very, very positive. There are a lot of people that have experiences that perhaps might not be as positive, but I think that for every time you hear somebody make a toxic comment, there's also someone else on the other side that has a word of kindness or a word of enthusiasm. And I think, we're all people, we're all complex, and, don't necessarily look patterns of behavior, well, then judge people. But I think a lot of the time, a lot of people are on the internet and they talk a lot of trash, but it's not necessarily because they're horrible people. They're talking trash. It's more of a performance. But there are people that are, as Dieter Bastian says, there's good trash and there's bad trash. And you just have to take the time to find out what you've got. Because sometimes, things are not always what they seem. So I always try to give people the benefit of the doubt. That said, what I think you're looking for is you're questing. You would like to understand Star Wars. And if I can just say to you, the thing about Star Wars was, and I've said this on the show a lot, before Star Wars came out, there was nothing like it. And when Star Wars came out in May of 1977, it changed the perception of what a movie could be in terms of displaying fantasy or science fiction worlds. It was the first time that a movie was truly transportive. Whether you were on the Death Star, whether you were in the cantina at Mos Eisley Spaceport, or whether you were at Owen Lahr's moisture farm, or on the fourth moon of Yavin, it took us places that we had never seen depicted on screen before. It was a first. It was a truly breakthrough moment. It was a time, especially for a young imagination connoisseur like myself, where my imagination was on fire the way it had never been. And I think that was true of many people that went to the movies. And it became something that nowadays, when I say that, you probably laugh and think I'm an old boomer. Okay, boomer, I can hear you say. Even though I'm not quite a boomer. I'm Gen X, yo. But I understand that. But what I would do is, like Louise X. Sparrow, who is a learned woman, and she knows what she's talking about, you really should go back and watch the original Star Wars. But when you watch it, try and put yourself in the mindset that something like that never existed before in all of human history. And try and imagine what it was like to be a young man, say a 10-year-old, who loved science fiction, fantasy, and horror, and went to the movie theater because this movie had spaceships and robots and aliens like I'd never seen before. I mean, like that 10-year-old kid had never seen before. And imagine what it was like to sit in a movie theater full of people and to see something like this. And there was nothing ever like it before. in the world. Nothing. And try and look at it from that perspective and then judge it. But if I could, I would ask you, if you can find it online, try and watch not the special edition version. Try and find, you can't get it, it's not available on home video. It was only made available on home video post 1997 on DVD once. But try and find the original version of Star Wars, and you can find it online. But because that's the version that you should watch, the first version, not the one that was changed in 97 and has been kept changing ever since. But I want to thank you for writing in, sir. This one comes from Scott Dolson. Scott Dolson says, Rob, I haven't been able to keep up with the show as much as I would have liked during the pandemic, but try and catch it when I can. But when I saw this the other day, I couldn't help but think of your show and insight as to a place to go to get some clarity. So if you haven't covered it, I would love to hear your thoughts. The past few years, I've witnessed almost everything I used to hold dear come under attack from people who claim to be for inclusion, but who do everything to separate and segregate people by every category under the sun. In the entertainment sector, we've seen this happen to Star Trek, Star Wars, and now it's happening at Marvel as well. I won't speak to Star Trek here, but the other two fall under the ever-expanding umbrella of Disney, a company when my children were growing up I revered. Now let me get right to the point. I'm not sure if you saw this the other day, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. Christopher Rufo did some great reporting of what is going on inside Disney as a company and exposed a training program they were implementing with their workforce. The program itself is shocking. His report and the program can be found here. Disney has since, I'm going to put this, I did read this article, and I'm going to put this in the live chat so people know what it is. And here it is. And this is a pretty shocking, actually, it is a shocking report. Disney has since removed the program and tried to spin its intent since this became public with what I would characterize as fairly weak defenses. Information on that can be found here and many other sources. I'm going to put, because it's the same author, I'm going to put this also in there where Disney, after it was exposed, came out and said, took it away, responded to his reporting. Again, I would love to hear your take on this if you haven't covered it yet, and I think it would be an interesting topic for the show. Scott, you know what I would like to do is actually read these articles on the show, and I would have to make it a topic unto itself. Just as a reminder, since your show has grown so large over the past year, I'm the pilot that you read my letter over a year ago whose father committed suicide days after we had gone to see Star Wars, if that jogs your memory of who I am. Yes, sir, I remember you, Scott. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to save your article, and I will make this a topic for the show in the future, because I think it's a really good topic. But listen, I agree with you. I think that in these calls, look, we now live in a world where a woman, Robin DiAngelo, with her book White Fragility, that's been around for a couple of years, and there's talk of critical race theory, we have all been categorized immediately as being racists. And I think that's a kind of a strange way to be, as if, I don't think that most of us, I don't think that most people get up in the morning and think about a bunch of other people. You know, most people are pretty focused on what they need to accomplish for the day, what their family's immediate needs are, their loved ones, their friends, those kinds of things. And, you know, we now live in a world where you can compartmentalize anything. And pick your subject. I mean, the funny thing is I bang on this particular show about, say, Star Trek a lot. And a lot of people might say, well, Rob spends an inordinate amount of time thinking about Star Trek. Well, maybe compared to some people I do, but to be honest, during the course of my day, I don't think about Star Trek much at all, unless it comes up as a topic of conversation, or I happen to be picking up a Star Trek toy, or, you know, I reach back somewhere and go, well, there's nothing right now that I can grab and pick up. But it's one of many hundreds of things I think about on a daily basis, if not thousands. And I think we're living through a particular time where in a effort to be aware and be open to other people, the plight of other people, we've put that at the forefront of our culture wars right now, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, but it's not the only thing. And I think nowadays to be pilloried for something, for somebody, and I understand, I think what is being forgotten is that human beings are very complex people, and there's millions of different things going on, and everybody has different concerns, and we're thinking about making it through our day. We're not thinking about how am I going to go be racist today, and how that does not define my life, and nor should it define anyone else's. And I understand that at Disneyland and Disney World, Disney is a company that caters to the entire planet. So they're in a different position. But anyone should check out the articles I posted. But this is definitely something I would love to talk about at length later, because I think it's good to talk about. This one comes from Tony Washburn. Tony Washburn says, "Dear Rob, I really think that you need to deep dive into the Stargate universe. I've heard you mention it a few times. I know you've sampled some of the episodes in the first season on SG-1. However, that series really doesn't get cooking until the second season, and when it does, it's fantastic. The series that follow are just as well written and great in their own ways. Originally, when Stargate SG-1 was new and released weekly, I didn't watch it. I perceived it to be a poor man's Star Trek. And I had new episodes of Deep Space Nine airing and Voyager. I really didn't see the point of watching a knockoff, although there were few series based on movies that were any good, MASH being the exception to that rule. My position was one of snobbery, to be sure. That all changed by the time 2008 rolled around. Trek was gone, and I began to search for some good sci-fi to fill the void. I came across SG-1 on Netflix. I noticed that it had run for 10 seasons and spawned a spin-off series, Stargate Atlantis, that was currently in its 5th season, and another Stargate Universe in development for the 2009 season. So I figured that maybe there might be something to these shows after all. I was stunned. Not only was SG-1 actually good, it was smart in a way that very few shows were. Brad Wright and company had crafted a wonderful world that went far beyond the simple B-movie it was based on. In short, I was wrong about this franchise. I urge you to give it a real look. I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I think you need to bring in some of the writers and producers on it for interviews. The Stargate TV universe stands third right behind Star Wars and Star Trek as great sci-fi goes. I frequently call it the greatest sci-fi series that no one has seen. Take care, Destiny Captain, Tony Washburn. Well, Tony, I would say that, I don't think there's been a show that people have written to me about more than Stargate. And maybe it's because I haven't seen it. Well, with the exception of Stubble McShave talking about Wheel of Time. But, it's a show that people love it. People absolutely love Stargate. And it's something I definitely need to delve into. I really need to do that. And I should. I mean, I enjoyed where it began. You know, people have told me, I guess it's so daunting because there's so much of it. But they wouldn't have made Atlantis or Stargate Universe without it being some kind of hit. So clearly, you know, there are people that do really like the show. And maybe it's definitely something that I need to certainly get into. So, yeah. This next story comes in. This next letter comes from Stephen Thompson. Stephen says, "The Robcaster is truly begirt, B-E-G-I-R-T, begirt, with many talents, the multiple single-minded warriors, and as we have seen elsewhere, the accumulator of the world's rarities. Thanks for reading my letter on episode 685. Before I go on to my point, perhaps I should set the table. Back around the time of my visit to Berlin as a 9-year-old, I remember that last letter, my 4th grade teacher figured out rather quickly that I was interested in that city, and looking back, she seemed to want to encourage my curiosity. The one way she did this was by pulling me aside one Friday afternoon and telling me about a movie she thought I would find interesting. It would show on late Sunday afternoon. The exact dates and times have long since escaped me, she said. The movie was called Night Crossing and was based on the true story. Wasn't that a Disney? Maybe it wasn't a Disney movie. I want to say it was a Disney movie, but maybe it wasn't. The movie was called Night Crossing, and it was based on the true story of two East German families that got together and assembled a hot air balloon, which they then used to escape East Germany. I did, in fact, see a good part of it that afternoon, and as it turned out, a good portion of my classmates saw it as well. We were chatting about it the next morning as my teacher was getting ready to start the day, and she lit up hearing us talk about it. "You saw Night Crossing? What did you think?" she asked us before the class started. My teacher already knew me well enough to know that I was all in for the subject matter, and she scored a massive hit there with that recommendation. For that and many other reasons well outside the scope of this letter, she's one of the best, if not one of the best teachers I've had. The point being is that I was primed for anything I could get my hands on related to Berlin, or in this case, the division of Germany at that time. Whenever anything came up relating to Berlin in movies, radios, TV newspapers, and elsewhere, it was time to stop what I was doing and pay attention. I felt that instinct come back when you mentioned Wings of Desire and Far Away So Close. Once you mentioned those movies, I'm telling you, the 9-year-old in me was of the mind, shut up and listen. I was intrigued enough to look them up on the IMDb. I don't know if I'll be able to watch them right away, but if I get some appropriate hardware upgrades, I'll look for them on iTunes, and if I can't find them there, well, I'll have to get creative. I do have somewhere in the archives a Blockbuster video card, but somehow I don't think that'll be helpful to me these days, and here I am, rattling the following around in my brain. Why haven't I heard of these before? With any luck, I can score some copies in German with subtitles, as I can get by in German even now, and I can use the practice. Well, the Criterion Collection made an excellent Wings of Desire Blu-ray. Now, I have to point out, Wings of Desire is a fantasy film. It's about angels on Earth and in the heavens, but it's also about Berlin. It's Wim Wenders' love letter to Berlin, and when Wings of Desire was made, it was made when the wall was still up, and Far Away So Close, the sequel, and yes, some of the characters do come back, takes place in Berlin after the wall fell, and they're as much about the city of Berlin as they are about angels. I find myself traveling to the East Coast fairly frequently these days, so there's about a roughly 2 to 2.5 hour block of time in the air during which I can watch the movies. I'll have to drop a line when I get around to them. Again, thanks so much for reading the letter and potentially recommending what could be a pair of good movies. From deep in the heart of Texas, Stephen Thompson. Well, Stephen, what a nice letter. What a great follow-up letter. I saw Night Crossing. I liked it. It's funny, actually, I thought about that movie when I was reading your letter a couple days ago. So thank you for that. No, Wings of Desire, I got to tell you, it's not for everyone. It's almost like it's a cinematic tone poem in a way. There's not much of a plot, but there are characters and you follow them. It's mostly philosophical musings on existence, but it's an incredible film. It's one of my favorite movies, and certainly one of my favorite fantasy movies ever made. So check that out. Our friend Ian Samuels is back, ladies and gentlemen. Rob, both Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5 are closing in on their 30th anniversaries, and still there are people who say Deep Space Nine ripped off Babylon 5. What do the believers say is their evidence? Well, that both are set on a space station, that the name of the station in the program is a name followed by a number, that the captain of the space station became religious leaders for an alien race. Both dated freighter captains and both disappeared. Both have characters called Lita and Ducat with different spellings. The purpose of both stations is diplomacy and trade. Both shows feature shadowy external threats that seem to take over the region, both through military and internal manipulation, and both first officers are female. Star Trek had 2 successful Starship-based series. The original and Next Generation was in its 4th season. And it might sound bad, but to be honest, after Gene Roddenberry's passing, the writers had more freedom. So logically, after 2 series based on a starship, let's try a space station-based Star Trek. Starbases had appeared on Star Trek before and was established that they were often named Deep Space followed by whichever number they were on. So when Starfleet took over Terok Nor, it was renamed Deep Space Nine. The Babylon Project was started as an attempt to avoid war between the Earth and the Minbari from happening again. It was designed as a place of diplomacy and neutral space where all were welcome. The comparison of captains becoming religious leaders and dating freighter captains is dubious at best. Sinclair, the commander of Babylon 5 for the first season, did become a religious leader. He went back in time to become Valen of the Minbari. He had a relationship with Catherine Sakai, who is not a freighter captain. She was a professional planetary surveyor and independent contractor. Cisco becoming incorporeal, as if I can say it right, and joining the Prophets or wormhole aliens is very different. So that argument doesn't work. Both these shows were made in the 1990s after the complaints about how female characters are dressed and treated in the original Star Trek in the first season of Next Gen. Studio execs had a lot of pressure put on them to include strong female characters. So for sci-fi, the best idea to make your first officer was a strong female. Both shows did that. Of course, since then, there's been pressure to make the lead in a series female, and even better, a female of color, which is why we have Michael Burnham in Dis Not Star Trek Covery. The reason all this started seems mainly down to Patricia Tallman, who played telepath Lita Alexander and also a bridge officer on board the Defiant. During her time on Babylon 5, she was in a relationship with the creator, J. Michael Straczynski. According to Tallman, in an interview, she claimed that when DS9 started, J. Michael Straczynski was furious and was considering legal action as they'd clearly ripped off his idea. Straczynski, on the other hand, has a completely different take on it. He admitted that with the blueprint for Babylon 5, some of its concepts and ideas, he did go to Paramount as the makers of Star Trek first, but they turned it down. Fortunately, Warner Brothers picked it up, but when DS9 was announced, according to JMS, a couple of Warner Brothers execs approached him, suggesting he should consider legal action. Straczynski has always insisted that he was never interested in pursuing legal action, and it was caused people to become distracted from the work of creating both series. So did DS9 rip off Babylon 5? My answer is no. Rick Berman and Michael Piller were already working on an idea of a space station-based Star Trek series after seeing Straczynski's blueprint for Babylon 5. Did they take some influence from the ideas? Possibly, but they did not rip off the idea. More than 50 actors, including Patricia Tallman, Majel Barrett, Billy Mooney, Jeffrey Combs, have appeared in both series. Only Tallman has suggested that DS9 ripped off Babylon 5. None of the other 50-plus did. What are your thoughts? Well, Ian, I agree with you. Look, Star Trek was pitched originally by Gene Roddenberry as a wagon train to the stars. So it's not a stretch to see that Deep Space Nine was conceived of as being the Ponderosa. You know, it was the ranch from Bonanza, you know, out on the frontier where people came to that. So I don't see it as ripping it off at all. The idea of space stations is as ubiquitous and space-based sci-fi as anything else. So it makes sense. And as you pointed out, we'd seen star bases in Star Trek. We'd seen planetary star bases. We'd seen Space Station K7 in The Trouble with Tribbles, which is the second season, the 67-68 season of Star Trek. So why not? We'd seen stations, Star Trek The Motion Picture. We've seen Space Dock. We've seen Regula 1. There's all kinds of space stations in Star Trek that predated Deep Space Nine and Babylon 5. So I don't think it's hardly a stretch to be working in the Star Trek universe and developing a new show and go, well, instead of Wagon Train, let's go Bonanza. I mean, that's... So I don't think it did rip off. And I think, you know, both, while the war against the Shadows and the Minbari and the Centauri and all that, and the Narn, there's all kinds of things that go on in Babylon 5. But, you know, what are you going to do? It's space opera. And when you're in space, you know, war plays a big part of it. And I think that that's probably what happened. I don't think anybody was necessarily ripping off anyone else. But you never know. Tatum Benz. What a cool name. Tatum Benz. Starring Tatum Benz. I like Tatum Benz. What a cool name. Hello, Robert. I hope everything is well. Over the past weeks on your show, the concept of fan entitlement has often come up, and it got me thinking. While I'm a fan of many IPs, it's Star Wars that has been my longest choice to follow. I feel that the time spent with Star Wars will allow me to voice my opinion. I was young when the original trilogy was released, so once the movies were done, all I had were the various comics and cartoons that existed at the time. These add-ons were not masterpieces, but they were something to expand the imagination. The release of the Star Wars RPG by first West End Games, then others, gave Star Wars fans a chance to continue to grow and explore the universe, if only on their own ways. I still run Star Wars RPG games to this day, but I've decided to take the canon into my own hands. When the expanded universe of Star Wars started, it brought me back to reading, and the addition of the new stories in novels and comics brought the universe to life and reignited the debates of who would win if. The release of the prequels gave me great excitement as the focus would be on Darth Vader, more or less one of my favorite characters, to the point my first pet, a cat, is named Darth Vader. The growing expanded universe in the prequel trilogy that created so much excitement also has its own dark side. The dark side of the expanded universe is that while great stories were written and we saw Luke, Leia, and Han grow greater than their on-screen time, the books eventually began to contradict existing stories or canon. We saw the characters become great and new characters were added to the mythos, and the best viewing for any stories is the theater of the mind, where as long as a good story is told, the mind will fill in the gaps and create the visuals. The discussion of fan entitlement starts here. When Disney took over, they wiped out the expanded universe, with the option to cherry-pick the ideas as they want. Many were upset, but I felt this anger was removing the few great stories they loved, but as fans were able to ignore the inconsistencies in the novels, to leave the expanded universe in play as canon, it would limit Disney's ability to create stories without contradicting the existing writings. It was my hope that Disney, with a clean slate and the collection of stories and characters of the EU, could create something new and something different. While the Disney trilogy shows that there was no consistent plans for a story or continuity, it showed that they were more hoping the money would come because of the brand. Where The Last Jedi was the movie that divided fans and brought the conflict of destroying characters to the top of discussions, it is here the talk of entitlement soars to the top. While it would have been great to see Luke as the great and powerful Jedi of the EU books, the path they chose was interesting. When Luke talks about the Jedi and the Sith more or less being the same, to me, Luke's sadness showed the idea that the ideals of the Jedi were misrepresented. The Jedi were not righteous defenders of the people, but pursued their own goals and ideas. It was this point where I had great hope that perhaps Disney would create a new interpretation of the Force, something new and fresh. The Rise of Skywalker showed us that Disney really had no idea of where to go. So as a Star Wars fan, I was entitled to have Disney create an all-powerful Luke in the cinematic universe. Wait, so as a Star Wars fan, was I entitled to have Disney create an all-powerful Luke in the cinematic universe? The answer is no. I don't own the story or the character. For me to demand that they make any of the characters a particular way infringes on the rights of those who own the rights of the universe. What I feel I am entitled to as a fan is a good story with good character development. If you want to show Luke falling from the ideals he held in Return of the Jedi, then develop the story and present it in a manner that is enjoyable. Since the fan is paying money and investing their time, the fan should be entitled to a good story. The problem studios face is that you will never please everyone all the time. Fans may not like a character's development or arc, or a story concept will be presenting in a lackluster manner. As fans, we can vote with our wallets. If you don't like the franchise change in the story, the fan has the right to walk away and not demand it's done my way. I apologize for the length of the letter. Keep the content coming and keep the hope alive that the franchises lost to bad writing will one day recover. Tatum. Tatum, good letter. I think we go back to the actual point of this stream, which is that the corporate minders of these franchises, such as Disney has Star Wars, it has Pixar, it has Marvel, three of the biggest entertainment franchises. I mean, I consider Pixar a franchise only from the sense that Pixar is now a thing unto itself. People go see the new Pixar movie. The problem is, when Disney buys Star Wars for $4 billion, Disney is not particularly concerned about the storytelling itself. A corporation doesn't know how to tell a story. They're buying a brand. And the problem with that brand is they can exploit. We can sell merchandise and bed sheets and backpacks and pencil cases with Star Wars put on them. That's one thing. But to actually make Star Wars, can you imagine going into a board meeting, the Disney board of directors? I mean, Bob Iger might get this, but like the people now, and imagine going into a boardroom at an investors meeting or a shareholders meeting and try and explain the story of the next Star Wars movie and need their approval. That's basically where we're at now, where the actual movies, I was again talking about this earlier on the John Campea show and earlier on this show, the corporate, I don't know, ecosystem that exists at a studio is unfortunately counterproductive to creativity, because they don't, how do you quantify whether a movie's good or not? The only way to quantify it is if the audience likes it. But when you're a corporation, they want to see, you need to, where's the memo? Where's the PowerPoint presentation? How do we know this is good? Because I can't make a decision. It's not on a spreadsheet. Give me bullet points. Well, stories don't work that way. So you've got these corporations that are living and dying based on their franchises. Their content that they're making is fueling their streaming services, is fueling the merchandising, is fueling box office, and yet the corporate executives have no fucking clue how to make the product that they're selling. And I find that very strange to me. It's getting worse and worse and worse. And yet these corporations are telling the creatives what they're supposed to make. The Disney article, the article that was in Variety about where Disney's at, the corporate culture in the wake of Bob Iger, I think it was Hollywood Reporter actually, in the wake of Bob Iger leaving and Bob Chapek taking over, they're adding extra layers of corporate bureaucracy to the creatives who are like, wait a minute, I used to be the one that was, they're creating unnecessary disruption in their creative areas which don't need it, which are not going to help you get a better product. And that's what's problematic, and I think that when Disney decides, well, we're going to get rid of the EU, it's no longer, like Lucasfilm was saying that the EU is canon. They had story groups saying that this is canon. We're all trying to keep this in line. And Disney just, when they bought Lucasfilm, they said, nope, this is not canon anymore. We don't care. We're going to go redo our own canon, which I thought was interesting that Disney as a corporate entity said part of what they bought, like they own all these books, that could theoretically be in print forever, being sold on Kindle forever. Every time there's a new Star Wars fan in the world, they're going to turn to those books and read them. And the idea that Disney actually said, nope. It's funny to me, I'm like, why didn't they just adapt those books? It's pretty funny that if you were to go and say, okay, we're going to do a new Star Wars trilogy, and we're going to start with doing the Thrawn trilogy. It's just going to be, Luke's going to be a little older, and we're going to get he's already going to be a Jedi, and he's going to be a little further along. Maybe he's already got, wouldn't that have been more interesting if they went down that road and they were already like the Solo twins, like they were already alive? And that was the next trilogy? It's funny to me that they already had a template. We already have these versions of these characters. They're in the books that we own. But no, we're going to bring in these new creators and they're going to start from scratch. I'm like, it would have been far easier, and you might have had a much better financial situation if you'd gone and adapted the previously existing EU books with Jason Solo and Mara Jade or whatever you want to call it. Can you imagine? It's funny because that's kind of what they're doing. They're not direct adaptations, but now all this extra EU stuff, whether it's Clone Wars or whether it's all being adapted into the Star Wars universe in The Mandalorian and now Ahsoka Tano and a Book of Boba Fett. There's all this EU stuff that they're just adapting anyway. They should have kept it and just put it on screen. It would have been far easier. The suits could have been like, oh, you're going to adapt this. How good. Well, perfect. Let's go do that. And then they would have known. But instead, nope, they didn't do that. But it's a strange thing. Yeah. Omar94 writes in, short one, Omar. Hi, Rob, moderators and Post-Geek Singularity. With all the TV show adaptations of non-Marvel and DC superhero comics like The Boys, Invincible, and recently Jupiter's Legacy, I'd be interested in knowing what other adaptations we'll see down the line. I'm not sure entirely, since I'm sure that there are plenty to be made, but I would be interested in seeing if we ever get an adaptation of Kurt Busiek. I always say Busiek. I don't know if that's Busiek. His Astro City, which I love. I love Astro City. Hell, I've told people that, honestly, I think they should adapt the comic book I self-published, Living in Infamy, which was this close to getting made by Skydance. Maybe somebody else will make it. It's a story about supervillains and not heroes. But there's so many. I'd love to see Astro City. Astro City is great. I just don't know. We might be hitting peak saturation. Anyway, let's see. What are you guys saying? I don't know. Let's jump back into what you are saying. I lost my place. And here we are. Let's go back there. So Alexander Wilson actually said something that I didn't say. I don't think he might have sent it in after I stopped streaming. Alexander Wilson says, the thing is, Superman isn't human. Is there a story out there where the skin color of Superman played a factor in the storyline? Nope. And so maybe that's what they're going to do with this new Superman. I think it's a really great point, Alexander. Terrier says, actually this is from yesterday too, he said, you know what I want? Entertainment from every country, every nation, every race. Every time I see a new perspective, I'm a better person. Hear, hear, Terrier, and that's why you and I have been friends for so long. I agree. Dakota, one of two, sends in a couple of tips and says, short story ideas. 6 friends take off on a plane to parachute near the Annapurna Mountains and to hike back, only to miss their jump area, finding out the pilot had died during the flight, now with the dilemma of not knowing how to fly a plane with only moments until they pass over the mountain, knowing if they jump on the other side of the mountain, it would be certain death. Landing on the side of the mountain facing avalanches and freezing, they must now descend the world's deadliest mountain. I like that idea. That's a good idea. It's kind of Alive meets Everest, except they're going down. Not bad, not a bad idea. And by the way, if somebody steals that idea from you and makes it, don't blame me. Just saying. Me-Man sends in a tip and says, being that you've met many Hollywood actors, filmmakers, producers, etc., have you ever had an encounter with someone that was so unpleasant you decided to completely avoid their work? Ooh, good question. No, I've never met somebody who was so unpleasant that I've decided to completely avoid their work. I guess I've been lucky in that way, but I've never met somebody that unpleasant. A Man sends in a tip and says, as you know, most space probes, rovers, etc. ultimately end up getting crashed into planets or just left to rot like prior Mars rovers. Do you think the engineers behind these machines get quite emotional when their creations bite the dust? Oh, I can tell you. Yes, I'm sure they do. As a matter of fact, I think one of the most uplifting hours of television I ever watched, I believe, is episode 5 of From the Earth to the Moon, which is the HBO miniseries that Tom Hanks produced. It's an episode called Spider. And it's about how engineers and the creators of those machines can become very attached to their machines. And I definitely think that it can happen. But then again, I think for a lot of these people can you imagine all the engineers that worked on Mars missions that failed, that didn't get to the Martian surface, man? I don't know what that's like. But, yeah, I think anybody that works on something for an extended period of time gets very invested into the performance. But if you've had something like the Curiosity rover still going strong and it landed in 2012, I mean, perseverance and ingenuity, pretty cool, pretty amazing what's going on there. So I'm a Man also says, I was disappointed to hear about the deteriorating company culture at Disney. With your experience and insight into the studio system, do you think there's any hope that Bob Chapek gets replaced? It sounds like Bob Iger ain't happy with him. Well, look, I think Bob Iger built Disney to where it is. He wants to see it succeed. I think Bob Chapek is also a career Disney man. And it's a transitional period. It happens in every company. Bob Iger's a legend. There's a void that he's creating by his absence, leaving, and people are filling it in, and they're trying to figure things out and make it work. And let's face it, those people that are working inside Disney, again, are that little ecosystem is their own little world. That's what they live in, and everything is going to be based on their own little world. The problem that they have is the creators of all these movies, the content that this little world needs in order to survive and thrive. When they get in the way of the people over here making the product, that's the problem. And I think they see that. They see that happening. Hitchcock is, I hope it doesn't interfere. And I think, look, at some point, Kevin Feige can also just put his foot down and like, guys, enough of your bullshit. We're building your streaming service. We're giving you billion-dollar grossing movies more than any other Hollywood studio on a consistent basis. Just shut the fuck up and let us do our work. Stop your Mickey Mouse bullshit. Stop your petty squabbles or, internecine struggles here at Disney. Hitchcock is the GOAT says, well, it looks like after Phase 4, Kevin Feige's new challenge won't be a promotion at Disney, but rather a phone call to Walter Hamada to duplicate his Marvel success with the DC universe. Laugh out loud. You know what? I think if Kevin Feige was going to go anywhere, and I don't think Kevin Feige's going anywhere for at least another decade, I'd love him to see him go to Star Trek. So he needs to go to Star Trek, not Star Wars. The Bro says, is there a members discussion tomorrow? Here's the thing. So for those of you who wonder, if you are a member of this channel, we do these long Zoom calls. Tomorrow is actually my birthday, and I'm going to do a show here on my birthday. But before that, I'm doing a panel. The people that do the Mainframe Comic Con are putting on something, and I'm doing a panel at 1 from 1 to 2 about VHS Massacre 2, where I'm interviewing Lloyd Kaufman again, and that should be a great, fun discussion. And then I'm going to do the show, and then I'm going to the movies for the first time in 15 months to go out for my birthday with Elizabeth. So we're doing all of those things. So there will not be a member call tomorrow, and I also have to do the same thing on Sunday. So I've pushed that, but we're doing a Zoom call a week from tomorrow. But they're fun. The last 2 member calls have gone on for 5 and 6 hours, so it's a party. It's a party. So it's fun. Mario Lopez sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. The Blade Runner Tears in the Rain monologue is the best one ever made. Do you agree? Is there another one that you like? That monologue was an idea from Rutger Hauer. That is true. It is an idea from... I think it's a great monologue for what it is. I think the gist of Blade Runner is summed up in that monologue. I've seen things you people wouldn't believe. He's kind of dying. Attack ships on fire off the shoulders of Orion. Or shoulder of Orion. I've seen sea beams glittering in the dark near the Tannhauser gates. Yeah, it's a great monologue. All those moments will be lost in time, like tears in the rain. It's a great monologue, and I think it really captures. But there are other great monologues. Another one of my favorite monologues is Hal Holbrook's monologue in Capricorn 1, when he's talking about the importance of the space program, what it means, and what status it holds in the government at the time. I think Robert Shaw's monologue in Jaws is another great monologue, too. There's a lot of great monologues. Howard Beale's monologue in Network is a great monologue. But there's lots of good monologues. But that's a great monologue. I mean, as far as sci-fi goes. Mega Reacts says, a great story so few people know is a show called The Lost Room. Have you seen this underrated gem? Would love to know your thoughts on the story. You know what? I have not. Hang on. Let me see what it is. I know kind of what it is. It's from Netflix, right? Hang on. It's a 2006 science fiction miniseries. The Lost Room with things with everyday powers. Yeah. Peter Krause is in it and Juliana Margulies. I have not seen it. Sounds good to me, but I have not seen it. But I'm intrigued. I love stories like that. I didn't know that. Terrier writes in again and says, thanks for the lovely conversation, Rob, and curse you for being so entertaining. It's 2 a.m., and I'm more sleepy than Kathleen Kennedy at the helm of Star Wars. I bid thee good night. Well, that's very funny. Just Plain Steve sends in a super chat and says, I'm late to the show. I'm just wondering if you got your endgame cap yet. No, I have not got my endgame cap because, and I've paid for it too. But you know what? They have said it might not come until between May and July. I paid for it. But there's a mysterious, it's all paid off, but it says I still owe $24. I don't know what that is. It's weird. I should call them up and find out. But I have not got my endgame cap. Connie Sang, our friend Connie, who's head of the experiential engagement division for JBL and their parent company. That's very nice of you, Connie. How are you, Connie? Good to see you. By the way, Connie sent me a pair of headphones, gaming headphones, that I use when I walk. I should use them on the show, but I go over, I hook them up to my phone, and you can put the thing up. They're great JBL headphones, and I love them, and I walk around with them on. I'm sure people, think I look very 1970s. Life on Leo sends in a super chat and says, happy birthday, Rob. Any movie recommendations for the weekend? Well, it's hard because I don't know what kind of movies you like. But I'm gonna pick, say, maybe a science fiction thriller or something. Well, I mean, if you haven't seen the sci-fi movie Moon, here's a couple of sci-fi movies if you hadn't seen I would check out. Gattaca, Moon, Children of Men. Any one of those three, I think are definitely something that you could dig. So check those out. And if you're going to watch like an action movie, I don't know. If you haven't seen Arnold Schwarzenegger's Commando, that's always good for a hoot. Again, these are, you know what? If you've never seen John Frankenheimer's movie, you want to watch an action film with good car chases, Ronin with Robert De Niro and Jean Reno. If you haven't seen Ronin, check that out. Those are random ones. Steve Foley says, you have the right to remain silent forever. On May 13th, 1988, Bruce Campbell was on the hunt for Maniac Cop. That's fantastic. I love that. I love Maniac Cop. And I thought, wow, 88. Wow, that's a long time ago. Sheriff Carl sends in, well, thank you, Sheriff Carl. Happy birthday, motherfucker. Well, it'll be tonight at midnight, May 15th, and all day May 15th. I hope you have a triumphant day of boozing and hot, dirty sex. I hope you keep living long and prospering. Well, Sheriff Carl, I all of those sentiments, here's to you, sir. Tonight, join us for Midnight Metal. It will Midnight Metal starts. It kicks off my birthday day at midnight tonight, right here on the Burnettwork. Join us. Just Plain Steve says the $22 is the shipping charge. I got mine today. It's amazing. Well, how do you? Where is mine? You know what? I that was paid off months ago. I want that figure so bad. What we're talking about is the Hot Toys Endgame cap that comes with the broken shield, the Mjolnir. I mean, I want it so bad. I don't have it. It's very frustrating. So we shall see. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kind souls, gentle beings, all of you across the 28 known galaxies, I think I'm going to bring this chat to a close, and I want to say thank you for everybody who's here. I want to thank my moderating staff, beginning with Mike Bodden, of course, the Richard, Joshua Levesque is here, Louise X. Sparrow, Darren J. Seeley, Justin Toner, Bunyan Snipe. Did I say Louise X. Sparrow? I got 2 Brits in the chat. I also want to say thank you to Purple Valkyrie, who drops in occasionally just because she celebrated her year anniversary on YouTube today. I want to thank her too. I don't know if she's here, but I want to thank her. I want to thank Greg Smith and all of you lovely folks for being the way you are. I want to thank everybody for supporting the channel with super chats and tips, and also letters, which you can write me free of charge at theburnettwork.net. If you don't want me to read your letter live on the air, please state that, so I don't, because I've been getting a few lately. So I got a couple of very moving letters from people that didn't want me to read them on the air, but I can understand why. And a special shout out goes to the official cheesemonger of this channel. The official cheesemonger, Mr. Kaz Graphics himself, the official cheesemonger of this channel, sent us another wonderful, well, 2 boxes of Beecher's handmade cheese deliciousness. Beecher's handmade cheese is great. And Kaz sent us, what's the name? Like, there's got to be a name when you get triangles of cheese. Like, what do they call? Like, is there a name? Like, I don't know. There's got to be a name for that. But he sent us the delicious, well, it's Beecher's handmade cheese, and it's very, very good. He also sent us their macaroni and cheese. That's Oprah's favorite. So I want to say thank you to Kaz for sending that and being the official cheesemonger of, I hope, Beecher's homemade cheese should give you a kickback, because they're amazing. And they're also a sponsor of one of the Film Festival Awards, which, yes, that's coming up. It's going to happen. We're finally going to close that off on the 700th show. But I want to thank Kaz Graphics for the cheese and all kinds of things, because it's great. And on that note, I want to say to you, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And with that, I bid you all farewell and say, have a better day.